Time to talk Buckeyes here at the Voice of College Football. We do this every Wednesday with you, typically at 1:30 Eastern, but sometimes we got to switch up. So please hit that bell for the notifications once you've subscribed. So you are right here for Ohio State football talk. Even though Kevin says he's got nothing for us this week, he's thinking nothing but basketball. I think once we get you started, Kevin, I know better. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great.
Doing well.
Okay. So we're not going to lead off with Kevin, I guess. Guess we'll lead off with whomever else wants to take it between Tony and Steve on wide receiver Carnell Tate is listed as top 5. So people were getting excited on Twitter, and then I saw somebody chime in and just remind everyone, hey, it's a top 5 announcement. Settle down. Tennessee, Georgia, Notre Dame, Ohio State, and somebody else we've got in there that I missed, but I've got it on a banner, so I will know soon. Tony, we'll start with you, I guess. Carnell Tate, you have a good lead here. It seems to be Ohio State, Notre Dame from everything I hear.
Yeah, it seems to be that. I believe he is originally a Chicago area kid who went down to IMG, but I got to see him a little bit last year in some IMG games, and he dominated, and see him a little bit, and I think maybe some 7-on-7 stuff, and he's just a pretty decent sized target, 6'2" or so. Maybe some Michael Thomas comparisons if we want to go that far, and just in terms of the way he can position his body and go up and get a ball and then come down with it in strong hands and things like that. So I think it would be clearly a huge gift for Ohio State. I know Ohio State feels pretty good, and those that cover these sort of things feel pretty good about Ohio State's chances. So that would be I don't want to say huge. How about we'll just say that would be typical of Brian Hartline, as we all get spoiled by what this guy does on the recruiting trail. Ho-hum.
Yep. 6'2", 185 pounds, wide receiver, Bradenton, Florida, IMG Academy, ranked number 21 overall in the composite nationally, number 3 wide receiver, number 7 player in Florida. I find it interesting that Tom Loy, who covers Notre Dame recruiting, Steve Wiltfong, who's been a national guy for 24/7, they both have Ohio State as their crystal ball pick on Carnell Tate. So to me, that does bode well, I would say, for Ohio State's chances. It was Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, and Notre Dame are the top 5 for him. And he's going to make a visit to Ohio State on April the 1st, a couple more here in March and April. And, hard to say when he'll finalize it and make the final decision. But obviously looking, you would think, to sign with whichever school he picks in December. So he is I think from what we saw at camps last year, I think he was at least at one camp date. He and Brian Hartline had built a pretty good rapport with one another, and very tight. And I find it hard to believe that he would go anywhere other than Ohio State, just based on that and based on the track record of what Ohio State's done with its offense and its wide receivers.
Yeah, I mean, he dropped a top 5, but this has been a top 2 and really a top 1, in my opinion. I think it's just a matter of when and not if for Ohio State. I mean, it is recruiting, and crazy things do happen from time to time, but I'm not anticipating that crazy thing to happen here. It seems like Tate and Ohio State will happen here at some point. You never really want to get too critical when they release a top 5 and say, well, yeah, but 3 of those are just hats on the table. But I think 3 of those are just hats on the table. It wouldn't surprise me if something suddenly changed in terms of Notre Dame, who's been another school that's done a pretty good job there. But I think Ohio State has a commanding lead. Obviously, Ohio State's been able to do it year in and year out with receivers. We're going to see 2 likely go in the first round of the upcoming NFL draft. They brought in a strong class of 4. We're going to go in and, you better take all of the images you can of Jackson Smith and Jigba this year, because it'll be his final year in the scarlet and gray, and then you just kind of go on from there. So, I think Tate ends up at Ohio State.
So it's sounding like, Kevin, when you say there's a top 2, but it's really only a top 1, you're not really considering the Marcus Freeman factor. Has this young man spoken to Marcus Freeman and made comparisons between Ohio State and Notre Dame? Apparently not.
Well, he can have hindsight in 20 years about it being just the worst decision of his life and missing out and saying no once or whatever any of that malarkey was.
Looks like he was at Notre Dame here maybe yesterday or last Tuesday. I'm not sure which one, but
this week.
Yeah, this week. So he's gotten all the Marcus Freeman he needs in his life, I think.
Rod Farva saying that Ohio State needs to land a big time linebacker and or corner and OT in this class. The linebacker might be Tackett Curtis. And if anybody watching or listening hasn't seen him yet, just Google Tackett Curtis huddle and watch his highlights, because it's pretty insane and it's incredibly violent. And as I think I tweeted out or said on our message board, the kid will never see the second half of a football game if he plays like that in a college game, because it's impressive. So that's a guy that they're certainly trying to land in terms of the linebacker. The offensive tackle, they may already have in Luke Montgomery, and obviously they're going to go get more, but Montgomery's a top 5 or 6 tackle in the nation out of Findlay, and he's growing into that role. Corner might be, I know they're all in trying to get AJ Harris, and that might be, I don't know if that's going to, it'll get easier probably than it has been since Kerry Combs left, in terms of they will be making these relationships with Tim Walton and AJ Harris, and so that will help. But I just, can Ohio State get back in there and be the leader that they were when Kerry Combs was still in? We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, it's really easy at this point to be concerned about they need this position and that position, but it's been a long time since we've really gotten to the end of a recruiting cycle and been like, wow, Ohio State really missed in multiple positions. I mean, it's easy to sit there and go into certain positions, offensive line, where Ohio State hasn't necessarily checked off all the boxes in a class. They have a lot of new guys in there, including Justin Fry recruiting the position, so we'll kind of see from there. But, we're sitting here in mid-March, and Ohio State's on spring break, and we don't have spring practice this week. So, I totally understand what Rod's saying there in terms of his concern. But, I have faith. I mean, I think every year we get to about May or June, and we're like, this could be the year Ohio State wins the recruiting national championship, and then some kid reclassifies, and it falls apart a little bit, but then they still end up with a top 4 class. So, yeah, it's a matter of filling in those needs, and you're right, and Tony is absolutely right about Tackett Curtis. I'm going to get down there to see him at some point. He lives a couple hours away from where my in-laws are, so I'll be interested in getting a chance to get to see the guy behind the Headhunter video. Things will be fine. Things will be fine in terms of Ohio State recruiting. I have no concerns.
Folks, we got 3 of the best here every Wednesday. So please, in addition to taking advantage of it, please show some support here. We got Steve Hellwagon from Bucknuts 247 Sports next to me on his way to Pittsburgh to follow those Buckeye basketball-ers. I guess they would be. Tony Gerdeman, Buckeye Scoop, and Kevin Noon from Buckeye Scoop as well. They're all thinking basketball, but we've asked them to take a quick timeout for an hour of football talk here on our Ohio State channel. So please, again, your support, like the video, share the videos out on social media. Super Chat is available right here at the Voice of College Football. And again, if you want to bypass YouTube for whatever reason, there are reasons. Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, but make sure that you designate the Ohio State show. But again, Super Chat's available as well. Leave your comments and questions. There has never been a better time to produce the show than this week, because I'm turning to Michigan like 10 minutes into the show already, because there seems to be a little bit more buzz around that program, whether good or bad or just controversial to a certain extent. Light controversy, we'll say. We'll start, Tony, with you. Okay, J.J. McCarthy out of spring ball. It was thought to be a situation in which he would need to have surgery. That is not the case. He should be back in July. I don't know if that's basically like having the arm in a sling on a shelf, just light tossing in July, or ready to roll at the end of July for August camp to compete for the starting quarterback spot. Just your thoughts about a quarterback situation and battle that we've all been anticipating at Michigan, between kind of a Georgia version of Michigan, where you got the incumbent starter that everyone wants to push to the side for a 5-star, but McCarthy versus McNamara.
I think not having McCarthy able to go this spring saves them from losing a quarterback after spring. So that's good. There's no competition this spring. So there's not one guy who feels like he's been replaced. So, if McCarthy can't practice, he can't beat McNamara. If he can't practice, he can't be beaten out. So it's you take that battle into the fall, and where he is, he's gonna have to play some catch up now. And you would have thought by the end of spring he would have been caught up. I think maybe by the end of last season he had caught up, and so when there's no spring for him, that's going to make things a little bit more difficult. But I think it's actually probably a benefit, and that means they get to keep both guys through the season. Then you get into the season, and does it create an issue if there's some controversy? But I don't know with that schedule when that controversy would happen, because it's very easy with the non-conference stuff. So Cade McNamara is going to look great. JJ McCarthy is going to look great. And then what happens in Big Ten play with their first game at Iowa in the Big Ten, or their second Big Ten game at Iowa? What happens there? And it's kind of an interesting thing that he can't go this spring, because it delays everything almost a year basically. And some of the stuff that could have happened this spring now will have to take place after the season or next spring, with just the competition. Where one guy loses, you get the Joe Burrow, Dwayne Haskins thing that might be put off until next year.
Yeah, it is unfortunate for them that you're not going to get to see the best of McCarthy this spring, and perhaps he would be a guy that would be in position to start the season as their starter, and where that would leave McNamara is anybody's guess, but it looks like it's McNamara's job for now. And as Tony said, McCarthy will need to get healthy first and then make up a bunch of ground in the preseason to try and supplant him. And maybe by midseason they will. But again, that's their problem. I think quarterback is a position where they're reasonably solid with those two guys. They've got a lot of other positions across the board where they lost so much talent that they're going to have to reload, and I'm not sure that they've got the depth, the kind of caliber depth that they need to win the Big Ten again this coming year. So without disqualifying Ohio State from the discussion at all, I just don't think Michigan's going to be anywhere near as good this coming year as they were last year. So I guess we'll roll that ball down the line and see how it looks in the fall. But I think quarterback's probably the least of their problems up there, I would say, at this point.
Yeah, Tony brought up a good point. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about Michigan football, but I also don't write a Monday piece on that team. So, but it's interesting because it does kind of delay D-Day up there in terms of you have these two quarterbacks, both of them, certainly McNamara saw the lion's share of the activity. McCarthy certainly came in and had his successes. You would think that one would just, especially with the mobility that the portal has given everybody, one's going to just say, I'm out of here. Now you delay it through the spring and you get into the summer, and when does McCarthy get healthy? And then you sit there and you get into the season, and you just normally don't leave mid-season unless it's in a huff and you're throwing your gloves into the stands and things along those lines. So, you never want to sit there and look at this type of situation and say, well, I guess in the grand scheme of things, it's not the worst thing in the world. You feel bad for McCarthy, be it if he's at your school, he's at your biggest rival school. You don't want to see a kid going through an injury or anything. But, for Michigan in the biggest of pictures, this may be a way that they could ride with both of these quarterbacks going through this year, whereas it looked like we were on a collision course for one or the other, maybe seeing their way out.
The other thing that hit me from Michigan camp right out of the gate, and the Wolverines are on the practice field and have been for about a week to 10 days. Nothing super controversial here, but Jim Harbaugh, a little bit more verbose than he's been in the past, emboldened by this Big Ten championship and a win over Ohio State, saying that Michigan is scary good. I've stated this like 18 times, and I still kind of chuckle after it. Not that they're not a good program. They get talent. They get a good team, but scary good. after they stepped off the field against Georgia with that type of performance, and he's selling us minus Aiden Hutchinson, Daxton Hill, Hassan Haskins on down the line, selling us on scary good.
I think a definition of
public, or is he saying that to just embolden himself? I don't know.
Is he convincing himself? Yes, trying to convince himself. Scary good could also be a way that we used to describe a guy like Steve Bellisari, who was good in practice and looked good, but then was not good in games. That's scary good. That's the scary good. You don't know what you're going to get in the game. That's scary. You're good, but it's scary. And maybe that's what Michigan is. They might look good in practice, but you don't know what you're going to get in the game. And like I said, their schedule is very easy. So they've only got like 3 or 4 really tests this year. So even if they're 10-2, like after a regular season, I guess if you're going to talk yourself up, this is the schedule to do it with.
Anything else on Harbaugh? He mentioned a national championship. Like he has spoken the words national championship. I don't know that he's done that in 7 years at Michigan. I've never heard it come out of his mouth before, unless maybe he was directly asked. But, he made it very clear, gunning for a national championship.
Well, I mean, he shouldn't come out and say, well, we're going to suck. I mean, I don't think that that's really the way you do it. I mean, maybe you don't pop off as much if you're not, if you don't know what you have, but certainly emboldened. I mean, they did get the win against their rival, Ohio State, last year. So there's going to be a little bit of chirping that's going on there. But then again, too, some of that chirping, I think that, Ohio State already has little posters going on some of the things that are coming out of Ann Arbor that are kind of pointed at Ohio State. So I don't know. Say less. Leave the chirping to trained professionals on that kind of stuff. I mean, listening to a Harbaugh interview sometimes seriously is like going through a root canal with no pain medication. It's just a terrible experience, but whatever.
I'm going to stay on a roll here throughout the Big Ten because something else that I don't know if it bothers me. I really don't care if Iowa wins 0 games or 12 or what they do, but this just it's just listening to, now that we've got an Iowa channel. We got a Tuesday night show with Corey Bratta, does a great job from the Hawkeye of the Storm. We have a great time talking Iowa football, and not to dismiss them. We're talking a top 15 to 20 program in the country. They're good. Got a tremendous coach, but I think a lot of the stability and the consistency also breeds maybe some complacency. They had an offense that was 123rd in the country. And this is nothing new. This isn't like they're usually in the top 25 and then all of a sudden the bottom drop. This is like they do this every year. They've got like a bottom 30 to 40 offense every year, and they prop it up with special teams and defense. And it works rather well if you want to win 8 or 9 games a year, which, again, that's kind of tough to do, and they do it. But do you want to win championships? We have seen 10 or 12 quality quarterbacks in the transfer portal go to places like Nebraska and maybe a JT Daniels to the likes of Missouri, Oregon State, or West Virginia. I was on a higher tier than all 3 of them. And they just don't. Jaden Daniels goes to where there's competition at LSU and still wants to take part in that. And I know it's LSU. But, Tony, I look at this Iowa program, and I just talking to all college football fan bases and beat writers like yourselves covering all sorts of different teams. It's just interesting because I get a viewpoint where I get to measure the level of expectation and the different approaches to football. And of course, Ohio State's way up here where we're gunning for national championships every year. And Iowa just seems to be complacent with, we don't need a quarterback. We got a quarterback. Well, we understand you do on the roster, but you don't want to get any better.
Yeah. And then you've got Brian Ferentz as the offensive coordinator, and who is just a complete reflection of his father. Yeah. In terms of, I don't want to say they abhor offense, but they certainly don't like it. And one of my football tenets is that if you have a bad offense, it's on purpose. Like, this is what you want, because there are so many ways to have good offense. And if you don't choose to employ any of those ways, I mean, the spread offense was devised to give lesser teams opportunities against better defenses. You look at what Northwestern was able to do in the 2000s, and with when they brought that in with Randy Walker, like what Purdue was able to do in the late 90s with Joe Tiller. They did not have the rosters, but they were able to move the ball with the spread offense. And there are ways to move the ball. Iowa looks for ways to let's just go 3 yards here, 4 yards here. I would even imagine, like, their practices, most teams will play energetic music during practices. I'm thinking Lawrence Welk type stuff going on over the PAs.
A 1 and a 2 and a 3.
Exactly. And but you don't go beyond 3 because you don't want to get too excitable. So, it's just this very accepting of your fate that Jim Tressel used to say, as long as the drive ends in a kick of some sort, that's okay. Kirk Ferentz is like, as long as it ends up in a punt, that's a win. That's what we want. And punting is winning in Iowa. And it's just, they could do more, because they usually have a strong defense. They're in an area where this is the West. You can win it. Anybody can win it if you just try. And they are very okay being with the understanding that sometimes you're going to go 2 years without being pretty good. But when you've got all of your seniors together, or everything comes in right, then you're going to challenge for the Big Ten West. And really, that's, you just keep waiting for those 2 or 3 out of every 5 years where you are something, rather than trying to be something more by putting in a better offense. They develop players really well, but that takes time. And rather than going to the grocery store and buying some food to help the offense, they're just, no. We grow our food in the backyard. We don't go to the store for stuff. We grow it, and the growth takes time. And then even when they have it, it's still, how many fullbacks can we put on the field? 3. Let's do it.
Well, I mean, if you're a top player, you're in the portal. Why go to Iowa? I mean, honestly, if you have a head coach there that seems to have a blood vendetta against offense, and you're going to go there, and sure, you can play in a lot of games, I think that you don't have any weapons around you offensively. So why are you going to put yourself in that type of situation? And every year we go into the season and, insert quarterback name. Spencer Petras is going to turn it around this year. And then Spencer Petras ends up getting benched, but then still comes back, and the numbers are horrible and they can't run the ball. So, it's going to take a situation of where, they were able to go and keep an in-state player like Xavier Nwakpa home. But unfortunately for them, he plays on defense. They're going to need to have some sort of offensive stud come out of a cornfield somewhere and say, I'm staying home, and play kind of the role of the Pied Piper and bring some guys in with him. And then maybe, too, they're going to have to lock Brian Ferentz in an equipment shed. Maybe Kirk, too. I'm not sure. And then maybe at that point they'll have a serviceable offense. But Tony's right. If you don't sync up your team to have everybody together as 4th and 5th year players who can figure out how to move the ball and score points in spite of what the offensive philosophy is, you're not going to really have an opportunity. And I've fallen for the banana in the tailpipe routine several times and think that this is going to be Iowa's year, and this is going to be Iowa's year. Well, never again. I'm even if they have all those seniors, I think that they really just 8 points. I think they got a problem with it. I think if they could win everything 3-0, 3-2, they would do it.
Iowa finally breaks through. I mean, they did win the West one other time, but break through, win the West, get to Indianapolis, and just got steamrolled by Michigan. I mean, I don't know, and I don't even remember what I think they think did they hold on and beat Kentucky in the bowl game? Is that what happened?
They did not.
They got beat at the end, didn't they?
Yes.
Yes. So those are two Iowa-centric results right there, playing a good team and get steamrolled, and then play a mediocre team and give the game away. So I don't know. Just feels like they're running in place and have been for much of the time. Kirk Ferentz has been the head coach there, and they've probably had a couple teams that would have been top 5 or top 10 teams, but they just, I don't know. On one hand, they get just enough talent in there to make it interesting, but not enough to really make a dent. So I don't know. It's just they are a rich man's Nebraska, to my way of thinking about it right now. If Nebraska's a poor man's Iowa right now, I suppose. But yeah, those two programs need to get a room.
You can go through every quarterback statistic in the Big Ten, and Spencer Petras and Alex Padilla played some, but it was mostly Petras. And I was in the bottom of 3, and every statistic, every quarterback has the name Rutgers, Northwestern, or Illinois next to their name, and it's Iowa. And they had the best center in the country. They had a running back in Tyler Goodson who wowed at the NFL Combine last week, and they had one of the best tight ends in the country in Sam Laporta, and they still are 7 spots from the very bottom from UConn in offense in the country. It just amazes me. And again, this is not anything new. They've been in the 90s basically every year for the last 20 years.
But the good news is, Mark, they have taken Brian Ferentz from the offensive line and are now allowing him to coach quarterbacks. So I think that is going to solve the passing game issues, and you'll find that the quarterback play at Iowa gets much better thanks to the expertise of Brian Ferentz.
So back in the 1980s, if you knew nothing about the history of Big Ten football, Tony's got a smile on his face for some reason. I don't know. It's the way I set that up. I don't know. If you look back at the 1980s, Illinois took its shot. They were good for quite a bit of that decade going into the 90s. Michigan State. Iowa was extremely good for parts of the 80s. And Ohio State and Michigan, of course, and others. What happened to this conference after that? And Ohio State, if anything, the state of Ohio has lost high school talent. It's not what it was 3 decades ago. Why did Ohio State emerge from where they were playing football, 9-3 football with everybody for a decade, to just shoot to the top?
I think I think one theory I would say is the end of the triple option, and not just the triple option, but running the ball 75% of the time really hurt the Midwest teams, because then you spread them out more and they're slower, and they got taken advantage of, and they didn't get the athletes that other programs were able to. But you can hide that when you're playing against you've got 2 tight ends and a fullback and a running back on the field, and you're playing against a 4-4 defense. Like, athletes don't necessarily come into play as much as they do when you're spread out or just playing a base defense and you've got 3 receivers on the other side of you, and you're tested individually so many more places now, and even over the last 20 years, than you were way back when you had guys that were, you'd have 3 or 4 guys all around the ball because the ball is just going right between the tackles. That's not the way it is anymore. And so I think that has hurt teams, hurt the Big Ten. And I guess we should all just blame Joe Tiller, since he brought that offense to the Big Ten.
And all things being equal, talking about, maybe, population shifts in terms of recruiting, bases moving, Ohio still is going to be the strongest of any state in the Big Ten footprint. I mean, because for all we want to sit there and say about Ohio seeing some kids move away, it's nothing like what Western PA has seen. So that dries a lot of stuff up there. Michigan has always kind of been hit or miss, and even with when it has some top end kids, it never is able to support the middle. So as we were seeing the game evolve a little bit in terms of bringing Joe Tiller in and getting away from some of those tried and true run as soon as you get off the bus type of methods, Ohio State was able to benefit from having talent in its state year in and year out, because even with the population shifts and Ohio State having to move to more of a national footprint in terms of its recruitment, it still can put together a pretty good team from within the state in terms of multiple positions. So, I think that Ohio State was just an early adopter in a lot of things. I think that Ohio State was able to benefit just from having enough talent here. And again, here in the class of 23, it's very different than what we saw in the class of 2018, which is very different than what we saw in the class of 2013. But when I got into this as an industry, as a professional industry in 2006, we were still looking at Ohio as being the number 4 state in terms of talent producer, if not 4, number 5. And while now Ohio has fallen behind maybe North Carolina and some other states in that it's still a state that produces a lot of talent.
I look at it that late 90s, Ohio State became kind of a fashionable place, I think, and it's just kind of fed off of itself from that point on with Eddie George, and then the teams that they had that were really good there in the late 90s. And then obviously they win a national championship, but upset Miami. And I think that caught everybody's attention, with Jim Tressel. And Tressel was great at recruiting Ohio, and Ohio was the backbone of a lot of those teams that he had. And yet he also went to places like Florida and California and Georgia and got guys that came in and contributed. And at the same time, Michigan was in a pretty good spot with Lloyd Carr, but then he leaves and they were like 7 years through the wilderness, really, what is it? Almost 15 years through the wilderness to get back to where they were with Lloyd Carr in 2006 when they were 1 versus 2 playing for, a playoff or the BCS, whatever. And then Notre Dame has been through different ups and downs. So within this footprint, Penn State had the Joe Paterno thing and the death penalty essentially thrown at it for a couple of years there. So within this entire footprint, Ohio State's almost had carte blanche to dominate everybody in recruiting and on the field. And I think that has really contributed. And of course, Urban Meyer comes in and recruits nationally, and it just kind of perpetuates itself year after year after year now. In a big year, they'll have 8 or 10 guys drafted, 2 or 3 in the first round. Just some uncanny things. Where they have 12 guys taken in the first 4 rounds, I think, in 2016 or something like that. So just some kind of crazy number. And, no school can say they've had more first-round draft picks than Ohio State. So they've got a laundry list of things that they could show a high school kid and his mom and dad and say, if you come to Ohio State, this is what, if you avail yourself of everything we're going to give you educationally, spiritually, physically, emotionally, football-wise, etc., you have the opportunity to be where Joey Bosa and Ezekiel Elliott and Michael Thomas are if you just let us do our thing for you over the next 3-4 years. So I think it's just something that one brick on top of another brick on top of another brick, all the way back to John Cooper and Eddie George. I mean, it just has been one thing on top of another that has built this thing to where, it's reached this fever pitch, and played for the national championship just 18 months ago. And, odds on favorite to play for it maybe at the end of this season as well.
And just look at the coaches. We've said this before, from Woody Hayes to now at Ohio State. They're all in the Hall of Fame except for Luke Fickell, Urban Meyer, and Ryan Day. And Luke Fickell is maybe the National Coach of the Year last year. Ryan Day is going to be the National Coach of the Year at some point, and Urban Meyer will be in the Hall of Fame before too long. So they've also had a good string of head coaches to get them through this. But one other thing to keep an eye out, and this is already happening, but down the road, Columbus is growing and growing and growing. And we've seen them overtake Cleveland over the last 10 years as either the 1 or 2 spot in Ohio with Cincinnati. in terms of high school talent, and it's only going to pretty soon. It'll be the spot in Ohio if it isn't already, and it's going to be one of the best spots in the nation. And there's just all kinds of jobs coming. People are coming, moving here, and it's spreading out from all angles. And so Ohio State is the footprint, and they have the Ohio footprint, but they're going to have a footprint within 20 miles of them that is going to be huge as well, and that's only going to help allow Ohio State to maintain what they are in the Big Ten and nationally.
Rocky, do you believe America is the land of opportunity? Columbus is the land of opportunity. And I know the people out there agree with that.
Well, Steve, the way you laid it out here, it sounds like Jim Tressel could be argued as the most important hire in the history of the program.
Well, he put it on solid ground, and for him to win that national championship put Ohio State at an entirely different level than everybody else because, I mean, Michigan had a split championship in '97, but really didn't capitalize on it like you would think. He came in and, I mean, they win that national championship with Charles Woodson from Fremont, Ohio, who never really gave Ohio State the time of day. Desmond Howard was a Heisman Trophy winner from the Cleveland area and played at Michigan earlier in that decade. And once Jim Tressel got to Ohio State, they put a stop to that. I mean, Prescott Burgess leaked out and got up there, and Sean Crable and Chris Wormley later on from Toledo, Boren, Butt, some different guys leaked out of Ohio and went up there, but no, they have not had the kind of success in Ohio that they were having. And I think I say this about Ohio State basketball. People ask me, when is Chris Holtmann going to win a national championship at Ohio State? And very matter of factly, I put on Twitter, well, the next time they get two players from Ohio in the same year, the caliber of Jerry Lucas and John Havlicek, or Jared Sullinger and Aaron Kraft, that'll be the team that does it, because it's the baseline is always Ohio guys for an Ohio State basketball team, with the Oden and Conley team being the one outlier of that, because they were both national top 10 players and both drafted in the top 4, I think, in the top 3 or 4 in the NBA draft the following year. So that was an anomaly for Ohio State football. Bringing it all the way back around the bend, it has been Ohio guys and keeping the best Ohio players in Columbus. And for Michigan, most of their best teams have included a few Ohio guys. Well, Tressel put a stop to that for most part. And Meyer, it didn't really matter at that point because he was recruiting at a level that Jim Tressel never even knew existed. So, year in and year out, top 5 classes, whereas Tressel would have a top 5, then a top 15 or a top 20, then a top 5. Well, we got too much of that. We can't over recruit that. Then a top 20. It was kind of up one, down the next with him. But Meyer straightened out the curves on that.
Question coming in from NBA fan. What do you think accounts for the disparity in terms of results between high-ranking DNs from Ohio versus nationwide? Ohio top 35, cites a few players there, and then not Ohio national players, citing 2 of the best.
Zach Harrison, 5-star. I mean, Zach Harrison was like a top 15 kid nationally. So
this is a ranking post-college to a certain extent, which isn't necessarily fair.
Well, I would say going into college, it's the fact, those guys have spring football. And that helps your development. We can't poo-poo that, much to say that Florida and Texas, they have spring drills. They have on the field working on stuff year-round, whereas in Ohio, the track lobby and the baseball lobby don't want that. So the basketball coaches don't want that. So football has to play nice with all these other sports here in Ohio, whereas in Texas and Florida, it's the only sport that matters. So, and there's such a diversification or a specialization that kids don't play more than one sport in some of those states. They play their sport and that's it. So, I mean, the baseball kids and the football kids in Florida rarely do the two meet. So, it is a combination of things, but I think that helps explain. And again, some of the rankings are also regionally biased because most of these networks are based in SEC territory. I know 24/7 is based in Nashville, and if there's an 11 on 11 or a stupid camp in mid-February in Florida, they're more apt to be at that than they are to traipse up here to Best of the Midwest in Indianapolis or wherever, Detroit or wherever else. So there is some regional bias to the rankings and those kind of things. As far as coming out of college, you're ranked on production. I mean, Bosa and Chase were ranked really high because they produced. If that's what this is about, Zach and these other guys aren't because they really haven't produced to that same level. I mean, what it looks like to me, I don't know.
Well, I think the thing is, the way I read it is, why aren't the Ohio guys as good as the Bosas and Chase Young? And don't compare those guys to other. I mean, these are the Bosas and Chase Young are
racial.
They're not geographical either. Use other guys to talk about why the geography of defensive ends producing at Ohio State, like Tyler Friday's from New Jersey, Javonte Jean-Baptiste is from New Jersey. Use other guys. We have to stop using Nick Bosa's and Chase Young as why aren't they there? Because those three are generational and rare, and you're always going to be set up for failure if that's your baseline. You're never going to be happy. So you have to eliminate those three guys, put other names in there, and then see how the Ohio defensive ends at Ohio State compare to other states' defensive ends that go to Ohio State, if that's what you're looking to compare. And then I think you'll find that things are just fine. It's just once you start comparing to Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, and Chase Young, everybody's going to come up short.
And it's not a matter of there was something in the water or whatever. Everything is up to each individual kid. It doesn't matter where he calls home or anything like that. It's just, the opportunity each kid has. I mean, what he's able to do, whether or not he's able to avoid injuries. I mean, certainly Jonathan Cooper dealt with injuries. We've seen, there are so many factors there, and we just want to be able to put everything into baskets neatly and say, okay, well, these kids were this and these kids were that. And I don't think that you can absolutely do that. That's just not how it works. These aren't characters on NC2A 2023 or anything like that whenever that game drops. So, you are talking about generational players with the Bosas and with Chase Young, and you're just not going to be able to ever, live up to that. So, we're in a situation of where, like at quarterback, we sit there and we see Dwayne Haskins, and he puts up these huge numbers, and he gets followed up by Justin Fields, who puts up even bigger numbers. And then you get C.J. Stroud, and so far through a year, he puts up even bigger numbers. So, there's this belief on seeing just things build off of itself, that's going to be the case at every position. That's just not how it's going to be.
NBA fan also asking about the running back room, and this is a common theme if you're an elite, that you're going to have a crowded room of pick your position, with Mayan having multiple years of eligibility left and Trey and Pryor being somewhat redundant. How does attrition due to portal project in the near future?
Well, Ryan Day wants, I think, 5 guys on scholarship, 5 running backs on scholarship, and so I think they will have that. Now, Marcus Crowley, where will he be in terms of injury? They got Dallin Hayden coming in the summer. But Mayan Williams, what I have been encouraged by is obviously he's still continued to work, and he's had a good attitude. Like, he and Travion Henderson are very close. And I guess if there were issues between the two or jealousies, then that wouldn't be the case. So, when you see them on social media videos at Ohio State Post, or G. Scott Jr. has his own YouTube channel where he posts stuff, and they've been in it, and they seem, like I said, really close. They're always together. So I think that is encouraging. Now, eventually, Mayan Williams is going to want the ball, but the running backs today and Travion Henderson and Evan Pryor came to Ohio State together knowing that they would share the load or being okay with sharing. And Mayan Williams last year started and talked about being okay with sharing the load. So these are all guys that, as long as they get the ball, they'll be okay with that. Now, Evan Pryor is the guy who can maybe do some different things. So I think you can get all three involved enough to keep them. And then whatever they do with that is, up to them. But they have to show it. And I think Mayan Williams, Travion Henderson have obviously done that. Evan Pryor could be more involved in the passing game if they want to do that. I think there's enough there, especially in this offense, for those three guys to do something. It's just when Mayan Williams can have 12 carries in one game and 2 in the next, that can get frustrating for a guy, I'm sure. But he was a guy I could have seen transferring before the season. Now things seem to be going okay just from, we don't get to talk to these guys all the time, but I feel better about the situation at running back for Ohio State right now than maybe I did in the winter.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to project on a lot of things there. I think that we could see a little attrition in the running back room, but I don't like assigning names to who I think could transfer because it's not fair to the kid. Because Moon said that so and so was going to be gone, and I just don't need to. I don't need to deal with that. But we could see a little bit of attrition, and they're still sitting at 90 now with Harry Miller's retirement. So they're still going to have to figure out how to get it down 5 spots, however that may be coming out of spring and through the summer and what goes there. But it'll be interesting to see what goes there. I mean, I think that you sit there and Travion Henderson got as many carries as he did last year because Travion Henderson needed that amount of carries in the later stages of the season. People were all upset that he didn't get more carries earlier in the season, and now they're all upset that he got too many carries in the later stages of the season. Master Teague wasn't necessarily able to get some things done. He certainly dealt with his own issues, his own injuries and things along the way. So you're going to deal with some of that. You lose Marcus Crowley. You go through a lot of things in that situation. So I don't know what the sweet spot is.
Travion, to me, I think is a very tantalizing talent, and I think he's got the potential to build on what he did this past year and have a huge year. I just recall probably 4 or 5 times where he's in the medical tent in the first half of a game, and some of that's being a freshman and not understanding your body and, understanding that you are the bell cow, that type of thing. And so they did need Master Teague and they did need Mayan Williams to be his caddy at times last year. And I think they will need Mayan Williams again some this year. But Evan Pryor to me is a guy that can definitely help this team. The little drips and drabs we got to see him last year, he is a very good player that it's awesome that they have him in the fold. And I'm interested to see, how it goes from there. Marcus Crowley not available, it doesn't sound like this spring still as he's trying to get back. And, his career's been star-crossed at Ohio State. So I think you got 3 really good ones. You got, a freshman coming in who will mix in and help out. And, it's again, keep Henderson healthy, keep him going so he plays all the meaningful snaps, and get him the ball out of the backfield, throw him the ball a little bit more. I think that can only help.
Yeah, both those guys, Henderson and Pryor, had reps for being extremely good pass receivers out of the backfield coming out of high school, for sure. And we saw that in the spring game and beyond. All right, we got Ohio State football talk for all of you each and every Wednesday, courtesy these 3. So please, again, consider the super chat. Like the video, share the videos out on social media, subscribe right here, check out their work. Of course, talking football and basketball, both, starting with Steve. What you got going?
Well, going to Pittsburgh and hoping to see if this team can resurrect its season after it was a very promising year at one point, ranked in the top 25 most of the year, and then that 4-4 finish and lost 3 games to teams with losing records in the last 2 weeks, and all the injuries and everything. It looks to me like a couple of those injured guys may be able to get back into the lineup, it seems, or I would say the lineup, but get back on the floor for this opener against Loyola Chicago. My question is, it's safe at 102 years old for Sister Jean to commute from Chicago to Pittsburgh? I just don't think she should be bringing the power of the Holy Spirit with her from Chicago to Pittsburgh for a Friday afternoon NCAA game. I just am not sure that's best for her, at her age, and we do wish nothing but the best for her. But her to be there and praying over her ball team, I'm not sure that's what would be maybe the best thing for her. But we'll see how that transpires on Friday afternoon. First game out of the box on Friday. The good thing is it's not first game out of the box on Thursday. We've been in that situation and been one of those watch teams where please report to the loading dock to pick up your NCAA watch, and you may now watch the rest of the tournament. So there you
go. Kevin.
I too will be going to Pittsburgh and have a lot of the same questions. I've been very much in basketball mode over the last few days. Just wrote a piece where I went through Loyola Chicago's season and looked at 5 pivotal games in terms of planning who they are, and basically came with the belief of while they're a year removed from upsetting a number 1 seed in Illinois, and they're a couple years removed from their Final Four run, you have to judge them on the team that they are this year. So it'll be interesting to see how healthy Ohio State is. Will we see Zed Key? Will we see Kyle Young? It sounds like B.G. Johnson is ready to go, but how much will that matter at this point? But it should be an interesting matchup, and I enjoyed on Tuesday getting the opportunity to watch a couple of first 4 games. We'll do that tonight as well, but early bed check because the truckster heads to Pittsburgh pretty early tomorrow.
Tony,
we'll be the ones going 95 down 70. So if you have a chance to talk to the Ohio Highway Patrol in, what is it, Licking, Muskingum, Guernsey, and whatever the last one is, Belmont counties, and then on into Wheeling, just let them know that we're on a mission from God.
The interesting thing, win or lose, with that game being at 12:15, by the time they get out of the arena by like 3:30 or 4, Sister Jean and Loyola can just head straight to Bob Evans for supper. They get there by like 4:15, get sat down, have their supper, and then call it a night by about 6, and just before they head back to Chicago the next day. I just wrote about Evan Pryor today, so you can check that out at BuckeyeScoop.com. Wrote about Jim Knowles and some thoughts he had yesterday about basically having everything he could ever want as a coach at Ohio State and some things like that. And, of course, the Buckeye Weekly podcast a couple times a week during the offseason. You can find that at all of your podcast platforms.
It's a great show thanks to these 3 every Wednesday, guys. So we hope you enjoy it and head on back here next Wednesday. We believe we'll be here. But again, we got 4 schedules to coordinate, so hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live. For Steve, for Tony, for Kevin, you guys have a safe week. Enjoy the tournament, and we'll be back here sometime next week.
All right, guys. Take care.